Hey guys, welcome to Crazy Days. Today, I thought I would take you a little bit more into We Had Everything But Money. This book is just totally amazing. A lot of you have let me know you bought the book and you are loving it. And this story comes at a time when Danny and I are looking for another vehicle. And our truck is a 2006 and it just rolled over 100,000 miles. That's probably unheard of in this day and time, but the truck hasn't went that much, and in the last 6 years, Danny and I don't travel a whole lot. And so the stories today is about how people got around. And I'm going to have to look down a little to read some of this. I'm not reading it word for word, but I'm going to give you the gist of what's going on. Back in the day, in the Great Depression, you had a choice. 2 legs. You could walk wherever you wanted to go, and that's free. As long as you were able to walk, you could walk wherever and get there. If you lived in town, you might have had trolleys or trains or something like that to get around from street to street or town to town. But there were horses, and then the other choice would have been an automobile. At this time, the automobiles were just coming in. They had been in existence for just a short while. But what was so different, and I remember this even in the 60s and 70s when I grew up, each type car was different. Nowadays, if you go into town, I can't tell you one car from another because they all basically look alike. There's a subtle difference in them. If you pay close enough attention, you'll know if it's a Ford or a Mazda or a Toyota, but basically they all look alike. So I wanted to talk a little about the differences in who drove what back in the Depression. Okay, it says that doctors and bankers drove Packards. So you guys can look these cars up to see what a doctor and lawyer drove, which was a Packard. It was a indisputable evidence that they had success in life. The farmers preferred Dodges. They had the power and high clearance that you needed to plow through your winter snowdrifts or navigate a muddy street or road. Lawyers, they preferred LaSalle's. Wonder about that one. Factory owners drove Buicks. Fords were both affordable and easy to work on, 2 traits that made them the favorites with the working class people. Every car had its own individual idiosyncrasies. One of the 19 Willys that we owned for 10 years was designed with a tiny gas line that clogged shut every time a piece of sediment flowed downstream from the gas tank. So there was always something going on with these cars, but a lot of people knew how to work on them themselves, like the Fords, people did. This little car called the Willy also had another idiosyncrasy. It was the horn button. It had a variety of functions, so you better be knowing what your horn will do. Because if you pushed it down, the horn blew. If you pulled it up, it automatically kicked the starter in. If you turned it clockwise, the lights came on. So when you went to mess with that button, you better know what's going on. And it also talks about the cars. People, no matter how much they would fuss about their cars in private because of whatever was going on with their car, when they got in around people, they bragged on their cars. And they lied about their gas mileage and things like that. There was also this thing where some people could just take and would piece by piece a car. They'd go buy an old junk car, and whatever needed fixing, they'd take and fix it. Or they would go and get piece by piece. Like they might get the frame and add a motor and then add a transmission and then, they pieced it together. Back then, a lot of people knew how to do things like that. So there were called old clunkers or junkers or junk cars that they did that too. And most of the time there were no radios. There was no computer type anything on it. And, you only had just a plain car. I remember one story, it talks in here about the tires blew out a lot. And I used to go around and talk to my great aunts and my aunts and different ones, and I interviewed them for a book I was writing. And one of my great aunts told me a story about how they did not have a car and they needed to make a trip that was about an hour and a half away. And so their neighbor let them borrow his vehicle, the only vehicle in the county, and he gave them a set of patches. and an air pump that pumps up, that you stood on and pumped up and down. So let me get it right. So she told the story that when they started down the road, for every 2 to 5 miles, they had to stop, patch a tire, air it back up, and go again. They were only going like 40 or 50 miles, but she said it cost them a whole box of patches to make that trip to where they were going and back. And she said it took hours because they were constantly having to stop and pump the tire up. And they could have rode a horse and buggy, but for whatever reason, they needed something that they were going to be bringing back in the truck, and so they borrowed the truck, and she said we used a whole box of patches. So the tires were not the best in the world, and today, people hardly ever change a tire if they don't have to. They'd rather not, huh? So guys, we may all have a lot of differences with our vehicles, and we may all have some clunkers, and we may have some nice vehicles and all this stuff, but ours almost all look alike. I remember when a Mustang looks like a Mustang. You know, I had one. They were beautiful little cars. But nowadays, they look just like every other car. There's a slight difference, but not as distinguishable as they were back in the day. So I hope you enjoyed a little more from We Had Everything But Money. And we'll get back on this series off and on. As I pick the book up and read something of interest, we'll do another video. So thank you from Crazy Days.